Настало время новой ММО-РПГ Кроуфол. Исследуй, добывай и развивайся. Открой все тайны гибнущих миров. Сражайся за личное богатство или за славу своей гильдии. Достойные навсегда впишут свое имя в историю Кроуфолл. Стань одним из вечных героев и проложи свой путь к победе. Кроуфолл уже в релизе. Купи и играй на eVGENIY.
Over the last year I made 3 videos about 3 classic Final Fantasy games, and if they're still worth playing to this day. Then the plan was to continue those video reviews with the next 3 games in the series, that being 10, 12 and 13. I had experience with those games in the past and was looking forward to revisiting them for the purpose of those videos. However, when I started to think about it, there was always one more game that I never played but probably should have as a fan of the Final Fantasy series. That of course being Final Fantasy IV. It was always that game I kept saying I will eventually get around to playing, and as you can probably tell from the title, I have finally managed to do it. So I ended up playing through the Steam version of Final Fantasy IV from start to finish for the very first time ever, and I'm here to discuss if this game is still worth playing in 2021. Now I know it's 2020 still, but by the time most people see this video, it'll be next year, so just go with it. If you want to hear only my final thoughts on the game, then make sure to skip over to this time right here, where I'm just going to quickly go over everything and summarise my opinions. And remember, these videos aren't exactly to tell you how great the game was for its time, but rather how well it holds up nowadays and if it's still worth investing time into. End of the day, that decision can only be made by you, but I hope to give you enough info to think it over. Also lastly, if you do enjoy the video, I would highly appreciate a like, as it helps out so much, but also these videos do take quite a long time to make, so any support you could provide this channel would be incredible. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's have a look at Final Fantasy IV. So let me know if you've heard this before. Final Fantasy IV does the best job of capturing the spirit of a true Final Fantasy game. It seems like quite a popular thing to say, doesn't it? And after playing it myself, I can easily see why people would have that opinion. It has pretty much everything you would expect from a Final Fantasy game, from interesting and diverse party members, airships and hovercrafts, chocobos, villages, Sid, and of course, crystals. Not only does it have these iconic parts of the series, it also emphasizes them and makes a point out of them, with the crystals being a major one with this game. But let's talk about this game with some structure. So let's start off with story, and don't worry, I won't be spoiling any major late plot points of the game, only the first 4 to 5 hours or so, as I think it's necessary for the purpose of this video. None of it should affect your experience, plus most of the footage used is about the first third of the game, or just some combat. You begin the game as Cecil, a Dark Knight and leader of the Red Wings fleet from Baron, as you're returning from a mission your king sent you on, where you defeated innocent people in order to steal the crystal. Upon returning back, you quickly get introduced to your close friend Kane and your love interest Rosa. Cecil begins to question his king's actions and decisions, which leads to him being stripped of his duties as the commander of the Red Wings, and is instead sent off to slay a dragon and deliver a ring to the village of Mist. But soon after, once you've delivered the ring, you find out that this was in fact a setup to burn the entire village, and as a result of the following events, you and Kane get separated. It's from this point onward we start to see Cecil struggling to accept who he truly is as this Dark Knight, focusing on all the bad he has done and worrying there's no good left inside him. With time, you begin to meet more and more of your new party members, such as Rydia, Edward, Teller, and more, as you then find out about a man named Gubaev who has not only taken control of Baron, but is also destroying nations to collect all 4 crystals of the world. It is also during this time that Cecil decides to leave his Dark Knight self behind and become a paladin, who is essentially this game's version of a warrior of light. What follows is a journey of you and your companions trying to stop Gubaev from obtaining his goal. I won't go into detail any further than this because I think that should be enough to give you a general idea. The concept of crystals playing such a major role could be one of the main reasons for why so many people consider this game to be representative of a true Final Fantasy tale, as this dates back to the very first game, with its warriors of light travelling the world in search of crystals. But that being said, from that quick explanation of the setup, you might have already noticed that it sounds quite cliché, and that's because it is. Over the 30 plus years since its original release, we have seen this sort of storyline done hundreds, if not thousands of times, and some do a way better job of it than others, of course. Now, this isn't to say it's a bad thing at all, because for what it is, Final Fantasy IV truly excels at its simplicity. In fact, playing it nowadays felt so extremely refreshing, from the amount of over-the-top and complex JRPGs that feel like they have to constantly one-up each other. I'm sure back in the day some of these games' mechanics were really complex, but nowadays it's really easy to understand and you'll be good at it within a few minutes. Also, whilst I'm comparing it to other RPGs, it seems as though every RPG now has to be at least 40 to 60 hours, otherwise it doesn't count. But that was something else I loved about FF4, and that's its story length. It's definitely one of the shorter experiences in the series, especially if you're unaware of a lot of the side content. So if you're a little busy and you're scared of starting another extremely long and drawn out game, don't worry, this is not it. Final Fantasy IV gets straight to the point. You won't find yourself having to do 5 to 10 side objectives just to advance the story a little bit. That being said though, I do have to point out that there are moments when the game moves on a little too quickly. I'm going to use an event that happens about 2 hours into the game, so if you don't want any spoilers at all, I recommend skipping the next 20 to 30 seconds. So there's a point in the game where we meet Edward, and his lover Anna ends up getting killed in front of his eyes. It's quite an intense scene, so as you can imagine, you then see Edward weeping and crying. But this literally lasts about 10 seconds before Rydia, who is a child, comes over, tells him to stop crying, and that's it. The game simply moves on like nothing ever happened, and you only get one extra little scene about 30 minutes later where her spirit speaks to her. Yes, he does bring her up a few times later on, but at 10 seconds before Rydia, who is a child, comes over, tells him to stop crying, and that's it. The game simply moves on like nothing ever happened, and you only get one extra little scene about 30 minutes later where her spirit speaks to her. Yes, he does bring her up a few times later on, but at no point is he physically affected. Instead, the game just tells you we're on a time schedule here, and it quickly moves on. And this isn't a one-time thing. In fact, it happens way more than it should. There's a few moments that could have had a way more emotional impact if the game didn't move on so quickly, which is a shame more than anything. But outside